The notification appeared in the corner of my vision at 3:47 in the morning. Mandatory firmware update, version 4.7.2. Estimated time, 4 hours, start now. I was in the middle of a dream. Something about my daughter, about her 8th birthday, about a cake we couldn't cut because the knife melted every time it touched the frosting. The kind of nonsense the brain invents when processing the day. My ex-wife was there too, but with my supervisor's face, and my daughter was asking why I was never home on the days that mattered. Even while sleeping, I knew it was a dream. Even while sleeping, the question hurt. The notification pulsed again, more insistent. The system doesn't like being ignored. Mandatory firmware update, version 4.7. Maximum postponement. 48 hours after this period, update will be executed automatically. I closed the warning with a mental gesture, the neurological equivalent of hitting remind later on an alarm, and went back to sleep. The cake had disappeared. My daughter too. The dream became something else. Something about empty corridors and doors that wouldn't open. It was the last act of freedom I had before everything fell apart. My name is Tadu Kessler. I work as a neural implant maintenance technician at Helix Corporation for 11 years. My job is to ensure the chips in people's heads keep working properly. 11 years. Longer than my marriage lasted. Longer than I spent at any school or previous job. Enough time to see 3 generations of implants be launched, become obsolete, and be replaced by supposedly better versions. It's not glamorous. When you think about neural implants, you think about executives controlling markets with thought, processing terabytes of data while having breakfast. You think about artists creating masterpieces straight from imagination, translating visions into reality without the limitation of human hands. You think about athletes optimizing every muscle fiber in real time, transforming ordinary bodies into perfect performance machines. You don't think about the guy who shows up when the implant gives a sync error at 2 in the morning. About the technician who spends hours calibrating interfaces for people who can no longer distinguish real memories from corrupted files. About the level 3 employee who cleans up the digital remains of people who died with cloud storage debts, erasing decades of memories because the family can't pay the perpetual maintenance fee. That's me. I'm 41 years old. Hair starting to thin at the temples, beard that grows unevenly when I forget to trim it. I live in a 30 square meter apartment in residential block 7, the type of place where walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor cough at 3 in the morning. I have an 8-year-old daughter who lives with her mother across town and who I see 2 weekends a month when work allows. It doesn't allow often. And I have a Helix Series 4 implant installed at the base of my skull that lets me do my job. Without it, I'd be just another unqualified technician competing for jobs that don't require neural connection. With it, I have access to technical schematics, real-time diagnostics, direct communication with systems, and, more importantly, stable employment at a corporation that controls 30% of the neural hardware market. The implant is company property. It's in the contract, in small print nobody reads until it's too late. All neural hardware provided by Helix remains Helix property, and is subject to updates, maintenance, and recall as determined by the corporation. I read it. At the time, it seemed like a fair price. Access to the future in exchange for some clauses that probably would never be enforced. Now, I care. Now I care because I have a daughter named Beatrice, who turns 8 next week, and who will probably get an implant when she turns 10. Like most children from corporate employee families. And if I accept this update, if I let them erase whatever they're erasing, then Beatrice will grow up in a world where truth can be edited like a text document, where memories are company property, where nobody remembers what was lost because the very ability to remember was removed. I can't let this happen without at least trying to understand what's happening. The second notification came the next day, during lunch. The Sector 12 cafeteria was exactly what you'd expect from a corporation that spent billions on neural technology, but cut costs on everything else. Molded plastic tables, chairs that creaked when you sat down, fluorescent lighting that gave you headaches after 20 minutes. The type of environment designed to make you eat fast and get back to work. I was eating something the menu called synthetic protein with hydroponic vegetables, but that tasted like damp cardboard with a vague memory of seasoning. Marina from accounting was sitting across from me talking about something related to end-of-quarter goals. I wasn't listening. Mandatory firmware update. Version 4.7.2 remaining postponement. 41 hours included features. Memory optimization, bug fixes, security improvements. Memory optimization. The phrase kept spinning in my head while Marina continued her monologue. I'd spent 11 years working with implants. Knew the terminology. Knew the difference between optimization and compression and archiving and deletion. Each term had precise technical meaning. Memory optimization could mean many things. Data reorganization for faster access, elimination of redundancies, consolidation of fragmented files, or it could mean something else. "Are you okay?" Marina asked, interrupting my thoughts. I blinked. "What? You had that glazed look? Received something?" "Firmware update. Mandatory." She nodded, as if that explained everything. For her, it probably did. "I did mine last night. Woke up a bit groggy, but it passed after coffee." "Did you notice any difference?" "Difference how?" "I don't know. Anything. Something working differently. Slower memories. Any anomaly." Marina thought for a moment, forehead wrinkled in concentration, then shrugged. "Not that I noticed. Why?" "Professional curiosity." She accepted the explanation and went back to talking about quarterly goals. I went back to not listening, but this time it wasn't casual distraction. My mind was working. Memory optimization. What exactly were they optimizing? That night, instead of accepting the update and going to sleep like a sensible person, I did something I hadn't done in years. I researched. My apartment had a folding table against the wall, the type of furniture you buy when you're not sure you'll stay somewhere long enough to justify something better. I pulled out the table, sat on the bed because I didn't have a chair, and started accessing the corporate network through the implant. Level 3 employees had restricted access. Helix's philosophy was clear. Each employee received exactly the information necessary to perform their job. No more, no less. Efficiency, they called it. Compartmentalization would be more honest. Maintenance technicians needed to know how to fix things. We didn't need to understand why things worked the way they worked, or who made decisions about how they should work, or what happened at levels above our field of vision. But I'd been a maintenance technician for 11 years, long enough to learn things that weren't in the manual. I knew shortcuts, knew where system logs were hidden, in folders nobody checked because nobody thought it was worth checking. I started with official documentation for version 4.7.2. The update had been released 3 days ago. Wave distribution, starting with lowest employee levels, 1 to 3 first, then supervisors 4 to 6, then management 7 and up. Executives last, on a date not yet announced. This was damn strange. Normally, updates followed the reverse path. Executives first, always. They wanted new features before everyone else. Wanted to be at the cutting edge, have access to capabilities their subordinates didn't have yet. It was a question of status as much as functionality. Why reverse the order this time? Why give the update first to low-level employees? I kept digging. The official changelog was generic. 3 lines that said almost nothing. Memory optimization, bug fixes, security improvements. No specific details. No technical explanation. No version numbers for individual modules being updated. No list of fixed bugs, which was strange because changelogs were normally detailed to the point of being unreadable. Endless lists of minute corrections. Specific patches for specific hardware. Compatibility adjustments nobody except specialized engineers cared to read. This changelog was different, short, Vague, almost evasive, as if whoever wrote it deliberately avoided providing useful information. I tried to access complete technical documentation. Access denied. Insufficient authorization level. I tried development logs, where engineers recorded daily progress of updates. Access denied. I tried test records, where beta versions were evaluated before release. Access denied. I tried quality reports, internal memos, coordination emails, all closed. Everything locked behind credentials I didn't have, and probably never would. I sat on my bed, looking at the peeling wall of my apartment, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Distrust. Helix wasn't a particularly transparent company. No large corporation was. But there was a basic level of information that was always available to technical employees. Detailed change logs, API documentation, hardware specifications. The things you needed to do your job without having to guess. This information was being deliberately denied. Someone didn't want technicians like me to know what version 4.7.2 really did. Over the next 2 days, while the counter decreased, I observed. I turned my routine into an experiment. Each conversation was data collection. Each interaction was an opportunity to test hypotheses. I watched my colleagues return to work after their updates. They seemed normal at first glance. Same jokes in the cafeteria, same complaints about synthetic coffee, same professional efficiency Helix demanded. Jonas from Diagnostics still told the same stories about his dog. Clara from Logistics still complained about her ex-husband. Fabio, my shift colleague for 6 years, still made that dejected expression every time he received an emergency call. People were the same. Their personalities, their quirks, their behavior patterns, everything intact. But there was something different. At first I couldn't identify exactly what it was. It was subtle, more a feeling than a concrete observation. Like when you enter a room and know someone was there, even though everything seems in place. Something in the air, in the atmosphere, an absent presence. I started mentally cataloging conversations I heard. In the cafeteria, in hallways, in waiting rooms while awaiting maintenance calls. People talked about work, about family, about entertainment programs and sports results and absurd housing prices in better residential blocks. They talked about the new restaurant that opened in Sector 4, about human resources department gossip, about who was dating whom and who got promoted unfairly. The type of normal conversation that had always filled spaces between work. But one thing was absent. It took me 2 days to finally identify it. Nobody talked about Sector 9. This might not seem significant if you don't know corporate culture. Sector 9 was one of Helix's advanced research areas, the type of place Level 3 employees never entered. Locked door labs, expensive equipment, classified projects. Not exactly common cafeteria conversation topic, but it had always been mentioned, in passing, in hallway gossip. The type of vague speculation employees make about places they can't access. I heard they're testing something revolutionary in Sector 9. My cousin works in cleaning near there and said they saw strange equipment being delivered at dawn. Seems there was some kind of incident in Sector 9 last month, but nobody knows the details. Rumors, speculation, the type of conversation that fills empty spaces when you don't have real information. Every office has this. Every employee group does this. Now, nothing. Complete silence. I mentioned Sector 9 to Marina during lunch, casually inserting it into conversation about supply delivery schedules, just to see the reaction. Sector 9? She frowned, genuinely confused. What about it? Nothing specific, just thinking about research sector logistics. Oh, she shrugged. Never been there. Don't even really know what they do. You never heard anything about it? Rumors? Stories? Marina looked at me as if I'd asked about the sex life of unicorns. Total confusion, without any flash of recognition. Why would I hear rumors about a research sector? I let the subject die. But I started paying systematic attention. Over the next 2 days, I tested 17 different colleagues, casually, in normal conversations, inserted mentions of Sector 9 in varied ways and observed reactions. Always the same thing. Initial confusion. Quick disinterest. A vague awareness the place existed as physical location, but no memory of any conversation, rumor, or specific information about it. As if Sector 9 were just another corridor. Another closed door in a building full of closed doors nobody bothered to notice. The 17 colleagues had one thing in common. All had already installed version 4.7.2. With 16 hours remaining on my postponement deadline, I made a decision. I wasn't going to do the update. I didn't know how to avoid it permanently. Helix's system was designed to be resistance-proof. The corporation left no room for technological disobedience. After the deadline expired, firmware would be downloaded automatically, installed during next sleep cycle without my permission or awareness, and I'd wake up like everyone else. Optimized, fixed, improved, forgotten of something I apparently shouldn't remember. But I had 16 hours. 16 hours to discover what was happening before losing the ability to care about the answer. I waited until night shift, when hallways were empty and monitoring systems operated with reduced crew. 2 people watching cameras from hundreds of corridors, following protocols that prioritized high-value areas and ignored low-priority sectors. I knew which sectors were low priority, had spent years doing maintenance in them, so I went to investigate. Sector 9 was in the basement of Helix's main complex, 3 levels below ground, accessible only by dedicated elevators, requiring specific credentials. On official maps available to common employees, it appeared simply as Advanced Research, Restricted Access. No details, no floor plan, no indication of what exactly happened down there. I knew more than most because 3 years ago, I'd been called to fix an implant for a researcher who worked there. His name was Dr. Enrique Moraes. Synchronization problem between implant and lab equipment. Nothing serious. The type of bug that appears when systems from different generations try to communicate. Took me 20 minutes to solve, adjusting communication protocols and updating some drivers. But during those 20 minutes, while working on Dr. Moraes' implant in a Sector 9 waiting room, I'd seen things. Equipment I didn't recognize from any catalog or manual. Enormous machines with purposes I couldn't guess. Screens showing data in formats I'd never seen. Graphs and symbols that didn't correspond to any familiar technical pattern. And, more importantly, an elevator at the end of the hallway. An elevator that, according to buttons visible through glass door, descended to a level that didn't exist on official maps. Sub 3. An entire floor the corporation's floor plan simply didn't show. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Advanced Research always had secrets. It was part of the business model. You didn't develop revolutionary technology by letting any Level 3 employee snoop around your projects. Now, I wanted to know what those secrets were. Sector 9's main door required Level 5 credentials, or higher. Biometric scanning, facial recognition, and an implant verification that confirmed your authorization in real time. I had Level 3. Didn't come close. But doors need maintenance. Ventilation systems need access. Cable ducts need entry points for when something breaks. And technicians sometimes forget to close the back doors they use to do their work. Took me 11 minutes to find an entrance. A ventilation duct in Sector 7, 2 floors up, that eventually connected to the server room adjacent to Sector 9. I knew this path because I'd used it twice for emergency maintenance when normal accesses were congested. The access panel was loose. Exactly as I expected. Nobody bothered to properly screw panels in areas rarely inspected. I crawled through the duct in darkness, using only minimal light from my implant to orient myself. Metal was cold against my hands and knees. Air tasted like accumulated dust and ozone from filtration systems. 50 meters, maybe 60. Hard to measure when you're crawling in tight space without any reference point. I found another panel, this one open to an internal service corridor in Sector 9. I pushed. It gave. The hallway was empty. Not empty like, nobody's here now, but will be soon. Empty like, nobody's been here for a long time and nobody plans to return. Dust accumulated in corners. Emergency lights blinking at irregular intervals, some already completely dead. Equipment covered with plastic tarps that had started yellowing. Sector 9 had been abandoned, but not in an organized way. Not the way you'd abandon a project when funding runs out or when results disappoint. This had been an evacuation. I walked through hallways trying to reconstruct what had happened. Research rooms with computers off, dark screens reflecting my flashlight. In one, I found an experiment still set up. Tubes connected to equipment I didn't recognize. Stagnant bluish liquid inside. Sensors still active even after months without supervision. Whoever was working there had left mid-process. Labs with glassware still in places, test tubes in holders, microscopes pointed at empty slides, notebooks open to half-finished pages, pens dropped beside them as if writers had been interrupted by something urgent. I found what appeared to be a cafeteria for research staff. Trays of fossilized food on tables. A coffee pot still on warmer, liquid long evaporated. Expensive coats hung on chairs, not standard uniforms of low-level employees, but executive clothes. Important people had worked there, and they'd left without taking anything. Offices with personal photos on desks, families smiling in cheap frames, children at graduations, couples on vacations, moments someone had considered important enough to keep close during work. Coffee mugs half full, liquid evaporated leaving brown rings at bottom. Nobody had taken their things. Nobody had returned to get them. The place had been evacuated in a rush, and then simply sealed and forgotten. As if nothing that happened there mattered enough to deserve a proper goodbye. I found the terminal in the third room I checked. A desktop computer still with power, standby light blinking green in darkness. Someone had forgotten to turn it off, or maybe hadn't had time. My credentials worked, to my surprise. Sector 9's system hadn't been updated along with the rest of the corporation. Still operated with old protocols that recognized employees by outdated access levels. I started searching through files. Most was too technical for me to understand. Experiment reports using terminology I didn't recognize. Data in formats that would require specialized software to interpret. Graphs and tables full of variables that meant nothing without context. But I found a folder called Communications Classified. Inside, I found the videos. The first video was dated 6 months ago, March 19th. A conference room. Large table of artificial wood, synthetic leather chairs, 7 people seated. By uniforms, level 8, 9 executives. The type who make decisions affecting millions. And there was something else in the room. It wasn't human. My mind froze for a few seconds. It had a vaguely humanoid shape. 2 upper limbs, 2 lower, something that could be a head. But proportions were wrong. The surface seemed to absorb and reflect light in inconsistent ways. And it was communicating. Words appeared as subtitles, translated by some invisible system. We offer this freely. Knowledge, technology, solutions to problems your species doesn't yet know it has. We ask nothing in return except contact, the opportunity to learn about you while you learn about us. A gray-haired executive. An energy? Infinite. Clean. Available to all. The concept of energy scarcity is primitive. Surmountable. Medicine? Your diseases are treatable. All of them. Aging is a technical problem. Death is optional. Silence. A younger female executive, aggressive tone. And how much does it cost? We don't understand the question. The price. What do you want in exchange? Nobody offers anything for free. The creature did something like a head tilt. Confusion, perhaps. We repeat, we offer freely. The concept of material exchange for knowledge is strange to us. Knowledge exists to be shared. To limit it is to limit existence itself. It's like asking how much it costs to breathe. One executive stood and left without saying anything. The video ended there. The second video was from 5 months ago, April 4th, same room. Fewer executives, only 5 of the original 7. The creature wasn't present. The tone was completely different. Visible tension, raised voices. If this leaks, we're done. The gray-haired executive, now looking 10 years older. Free energy, universal medicine. Do you understand what this means for our business model? It's not just our model. Another man, fatter, visibly sweating. It's the whole system. The entire global economy is based on scarcity. Always has been. If scarcity stops existing as a concept, chaos, total collapse of power structures, or evolution. The younger female executive, same one who'd asked about price. Real progress, the kind of advancement humanity's been waiting for generations. Progress doesn't pay shareholders. We're talking about the greatest advance in human history, and you're worried about shareholders? About quarterly dividends? I'm worried about order, about stability, about keeping the world functioning in a way we understand and control. The world doesn't need to function this way. That's exactly the point. They're showing us there's an alternative. And the alternative destroys everything we've built, destroys Helix, destroys all corporations, destroys the very idea that resources are finite and need to be managed by people who know what they're doing. Managed. You mean controlled. By us. By competent people. By people who understand how systems work. By people who profit from scarcity, you mean. The discussion continued. Same cycle repeating. Same arguments from both sides. Tension escalating until someone finally raised the question that had been hovering over the room since the beginning. We need a decision. We can't keep this secret forever. The researchers know. The technicians know. There are records, logs, evidence in dozens of different systems. Then we eliminate the records. And the researchers, the technicians, everyone who had direct or indirect contact with the project? Memory recall. The gray-haired executive. Voice now completely cold. Pragmatic. Version 4.7 firmware is in development. Can be adjusted. We can add specific selective deletion functions. That's necessary, it's necessary. Silence. Then, voting. 5-2. In favor of containment. Then it's decided. The gray-haired man stood. Total containment protocol. Nobody outside this room can know this happened. And the visitors? Long pause. The man looked at the camera, or where the camera was, as if he knew someone would eventually see that moment. Inform them we decline the offer. Thank them for visiting. And make sure they understand they're not welcome back. They'll ask why. Tell them we're not ready. That we need time. Say anything. Just make sure they leave and don't return. The video ended with the executive leaving the room. The others remained seated, some with expressions of shock, others with something that looked like relief. The date in the corner of the screen, April 4th, 5 months ago. Version 4.7.2 had been released 3 days ago. They'd taken 5 months to develop memory erasing technology. I sat in front of that terminal for a long time. I don't know how long. My implant's internal clock said almost an hour had passed. But time behaves strangely when your understanding of the world is being rewritten. Alien contact, real, documented, recorded on video. Not a blurry UFO in the sky. Not a dubious testimony from someone who swears they saw strange lights. Concrete evidence of an advanced civilization that had crossed unimaginable distances to find us, and they'd come in peace. That was the hardest thing to process. All the movies, all the stories, all the speculation about first contact I'd consumed throughout my life assumed aliens would be threats, invaders, conquerors, that they'd come for our resources, or our planet, or our lives. But these had come offering gifts. Infinite energy that would make obsolete all conflicts over fossil fuels, all wars over oil, all geopolitical tensions based on who controlled what. Cure for diseases that killed millions of people per year, that destroyed families, that transformed human existence into an inevitable race towards suffering and death. And they asked nothing in return. Literally nothing. The concept of exchange seemed strange to them, alien in a way deeper than their physical appearance. Knowledge was to be shared. To limit it was to limit existence itself. It was the kind of future humanity had dreamed of since first looking at the sky and wondering what was out there. And Helix had sent them away, not because they represented a threat, not because they wanted something sinister in return, not because there was any legitimate reason to refuse what they offered, but because what they offered was too good. Because a world without scarcity was a world where corporations like Helix made no sense, where power couldn't be accumulated through control of resources, where the entire structure upon which our civilization was built simply stopped functioning. Artificial scarcity. That's what kept the system running. Not real scarcity of resources. The visitors had made clear that was a technical problem, surmountable. But scarcity maintained deliberately, so some people could profit by controlling access to what others needed. And when someone appeared offering to eliminate that scarcity, the response wasn't celebration or gratitude or even curiosity. It was fear. Fear of losing power. Fear of losing control. Fear of a world where rules that benefited the powerful stopped existing. They'd chosen profit over progress. They'd chosen their own relevance over the well-being of billions of people. And now they were erasing everyone's memory who knew. Rewriting history. Ensuring nobody would ever remember there was another option. I thought about my daughter, Beatrice, 8 years old in a few days. She was going to grow up in a world that could have been radically different. A world without diseases, without energy scarcity, without the inevitability of death waiting at the end of every life. And she'd never know that future had been possible, that it had been offered for free, that it had been refused by half a dozen executives worried about shareholders and profit margins. The rage I felt at that moment was so intense that for a few seconds I couldn't breathe. And then I checked the clock. 6 hours remaining. I was the last Helix employee who still hadn't done the 4.72 update. The only one who still remembered conversations about Sector 9. The only one who now knew the truth about what had happened down there. For 6 more hours, I'd be the only person in the corporation who knew this story. After that, I'd just be another employee without inconvenient memories. Unless I did something. I copied everything I could to an external storage device I'd brought with me. Videos, logs, documents, reports. Any file that could serve as evidence. It was almost 5 in the morning when I left Sector 9 the same way I'd entered, crawling through ventilation ducts with the device in my pocket and mind spinning with implications I still hadn't managed to fully process. When I arrived at my apartment, the counter showed 7 hours remaining. 7 hours until forced update. 7 hours until forgetting. I sat on the bed and looked at the walls of my tiny apartment. The cracks in the ceiling the landlord had promised to fix 2 years ago. The moisture stain in the corner that seemed to grow a little each rainy season. The cheap furniture I'd bought when I moved here after the divorce, planning to stay temporarily and never leaving. I had proof. I had truth. I had video evidence of a conspiracy that would change everything if the right people saw it. But who were the right people? I started thinking about options. Media? Major news outlets were corporations like any other, had shareholders, had interests, had business relationships with companies like Helix that could be harmed by a story like this. Even if some individual journalist wanted to publish, how many layers of editors and lawyers and executives would the story need to go through before reaching the public? Governments? Funded by corporate contributions. Lobbies. Symbiotic relationships with the same companies hiding the truth. How long until the information was classified as threat to national security and disappeared into some file nobody would ever open? Independent organizations, activists, hackers. How many of them used Helix implants? How many would be subject to the same update that was about to erase my memory? And even if I found someone, even if I managed to circulate the information, what would stop Helix from simply launching another update? Another security fix? Another memory enhancement? They controlled the implants, controlled memories, controlled people's very ability to know and remember. How do you fight someone who can make you forget you're fighting? The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. First, I tried old contacts. People I knew from before Helix, from previous jobs, from a time when I still had social life and friends who weren't co-workers. I pulled from memory, my organic memory, not digital, names and faces I hadn't seen in years. Ricardo, my colleague from first tech job, who'd pursued a career in an alternative energy startup. Marcia, an ex-girlfriend who worked in investigative journalism before any of us had implants. Jorge, a guy I used to play soccer with on Sundays before work consumed all my weekends. Most didn't answer. It was dawn, after all. Who answers a call from someone they haven't spoken to in 5 years at 4 in the morning? The few who answered didn't understand what I was talking about. Tadeu? Tadeu Kessler? My God, how long has it been? What happened? I tried to explain. Tried to summarize in a few words a story that didn't fit any summary. Aliens. Corporate conspiracy. Update that erases memories. I only have a few hours. I can imagine how it sounded on the other end of the line. Are you okay? This sounds... Look, have you been drinking? Aliens? Seriously? That's a good one, Tadeu. But it's 4 in the morning, man. Listen. I have a meeting at 8. Can we talk later? At normal people hours? Nobody took it seriously, and why would they? If someone called me at 4 in the morning talking about alien first contact and corporate conspiracy to erase memories, I'd also think they'd gone crazy. I gave up on personal contacts after half an hour of frustration. Second, I tried the digital route. My apartment had network connection. Part of benefits package for Helix employees. High-speed internet, unlimited streaming, free cloud storage. Everything a modern employee needed to be productive and entertained in free time. And everything went through corporate servers. I tried to upload files to sharing platforms, sites where anyone could create an anonymous account and publish whatever they wanted. The video started loading, progress bar advancing slowly, and stopped. Transfer blocked. Content violates corporate network use policies. Contact Information Security Department. I tried another site. Same result. I tried decentralized networks, platforms that prided themselves on not having central servers, on functioning through peer-to-peer connections no corporation could control. Blocked. I tried using proxy servers, IP addresses that masked connection origin, that in theory would let me appear to be anywhere in the world. Blocked. I tried old protocols, forms of communication that had been popular before implants, before everything was integrated and monitored and controlled. Blocked. 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 The corporate network was a wall, a sophisticated, invisible wall that seemed not to exist until you tried to cross it. I could access any entertainment site, could watch any program, buy any product, consume any content that didn't threaten corporate interests. But I couldn't send anything that hadn't been approved first. Third, I tried the physical route, If I couldn't transmit information digitally, maybe I could take it out physically. The storage device in my pocket contained copies of everything. If I could reach an external terminal, outside Helix's network, I could transmit from there. But the only external access points were in public areas of the corporation. Communication terminals available to employees who needed to contact external services, doctors, lawyers, financial institutions, all monitored by cameras, all recording every use in detailed logs. I could go there and risk it. But what would happen when systems detected a Level 3 employee trying to transmit classified files outside the network at 5 in the morning? Corporate security would be alerted instantly. I'd be intercepted before sending anything. Device would be confiscated. And I'd probably be arrested for violating confidentiality protocols. And even if I managed to send files before being caught, to whom? Where? Without a specific recipient, without someone prepared to receive and disseminate the information, files would simply disappear into internet vastness. The clock kept advancing. 5 hours remaining. 4. 3. Each passing hour was one less hour to find a solution. Each minute was more urgency, more desperation, more the feeling I was trying to empty the ocean with a spoon. 2 hours. I sat on my apartment floor, back against cold wall, storage device in hands. A small rectangular object containing proof that aliens had visited Earth, offered a future without suffering, and been sent away because that future wasn't profitable. And I couldn't do anything with it. 1 hour. The weight of helplessness was physical. A pressure in my chest that made breathing difficult. All the rage, all the indignation, all the sense of injustice that had propelled me through the night transforming into something heavier, darker. I had truth in my hand and couldn't do anything with it. 30 minutes. I thought about my daughter, Beatrice, 8 years old in a few days. She was going to grow up in a world that could have been different, was going to get sick from diseases that were treatable, was going to age when aging was reversible, was going to die when death was optional, and would never know, because I couldn't find a way to make truth reach her. 15 minutes. The notification appeared in my vision, overlaid on reality like all notifications always appeared. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to close permanently. Firmware update 4.7.2. Starting in 5 minutes. Preparing system. I closed my eyes. 5 minutes. 300 seconds. And then my mind would be optimized, and I'd forget everything. Sector 9. The videos, the visitors, the rage, the helplessness. Everything. It would be easier that way. It would be easier not to know. Not to remember. Go back to being just another employee doing their job, paying their bills, living their insignificant life without carrying the weight of a truth they couldn't share. 4 minutes. It would be easier, less painful, less lonely. But it would be a lie. It would be living a life based on a lie I hadn't chosen to believe. 3 minutes. And then I made a decision. There's an emergency procedure for neural implant removal. It's not something you find in official manuals, not something Helix publicizes or even acknowledges exists. But when you work with neural hardware maintenance long enough, you hear stories, you see cases, you learn about people who, for one reason or another, decided they'd rather risk their life than keep a chip in their brain. It's not recommended. The rate of serious complications is high. Mortality rate is significant. Not the type of procedure any sane person should attempt alone, at home, with improvised tools and without any medical support. But I'd been a maintenance technician for 11 years, had studied every component of Helix Series 4 implants, knew exactly how they were installed, how they worked, how they connected to the central nervous system, knew what the anchor points were, which nerves were affected, which deactivation sequence minimized damage to surrounding tissues. Minimized, didn't eliminate. The implant was integrated at the base of my skull. Interface fibers penetrated the cortex. Neural connections had formed over 11 years of continuous use. Removing it wasn't like taking out an earring or pulling a nail. It was more like separating two trees that had grown together. Their trunks fused into a single organism. It meant losing access to memories stored in cloud. 11 years of records, personal logs, photos and videos I'd taken but never downloaded to local storage. It meant losing abilities I'd learned to consider natural. Instant connection to information networks, the ability to do complex calculations in fractions of seconds, the neural interface that let me operate diagnostic equipment with just thoughts. It meant going back to being what I was before Helix, an ordinary human in a world designed for augmented humans. Unemployed, probably. Unable to compete for jobs requiring neural connection. And it meant pain. A lot of pain. The notification pulsed again. Firmware update 4.7.2. Starting in 2 minutes, preparing download. I stood from the floor and went to the kitchen. Under the sink, in a toolbox I kept for small repairs, I found what I needed. Scalpel I'd brought from work for a project I never finished. Precision tweezers. An improvised magnetic deactivator I'd built years ago out of technical curiosity, never imagining I'd actually use it. I went to the bathroom, turned on all lights, positioned the makeup mirror my ex-wife had left behind, adjusting angle until I could see the base of my own skull. 30 seconds. I took a deep breath and began. I won't describe the process in detail. Some experiences exist only for those who live them. Some pains can't be translated into words without losing something essential. Trying to describe it would diminish what it meant. Transform trauma into morbid entertainment. I'll just say this. It hurt more than anything I've ever felt in my life. More than the arm I broke at 12. More than the divorce. More than watching my daughter leave with her mother, knowing I hadn't been good enough to make it work. There were moments when I thought I'd pass out. There were moments when I wished I'd simply accepted the update and forgotten everything. There were moments when my vision darkened at the edges, and my whole body shook, and I was certain I'd die there. In my 30-square-meter apartment bathroom, with hands covered in blood and a semi-removed chip at the base of my skull. But I didn't die. And when it was over, when the implant was finally in my hand, a small metallic object stained with red, smaller than I'd imagined, surprisingly light for something that had controlled so much of my life. I was still conscious, still remembered, still was me. The space in my vision where notifications used to appear was empty now. Silent. For the first time in 11 years, my mind was just mine. That was 3 weeks ago. 23 days to be precise. I'm counting. It's one of the few things I can do now. Count days, mark time, keep record that I still exist and still remember. I'm hiding. In the first hours after removing the implant, still dazed from pain and sudden loss of connection, I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment. Helix would notice something had gone wrong, would notice the update hadn't been completed, would send someone to check. I gathered what I could carry, some clothes, storage device with proof, a little physical cash I kept out of habit from an earlier time, and left. Since then, I haven't stopped moving, changing locations every few days, never staying long enough to create patterns that can be tracked, sleeping in homeless shelters where nobody asks questions, in abandoned train stations, in forgotten corners of a city designed for connected people. Using old networks Helix still doesn't control. Physical infrastructure abandoned when everyone migrated to neural systems. Fiber optic cables buried decades ago. Public terminals nobody uses anymore. Communication protocols most people don't even know exist. Living like people lived before implants, before constant connection, before every thought was monitored and optimized and adjusted for maximum efficiency. It's strange. After 11 years connected, The silence in my mind is almost deafening. No notifications, no updates, no constant presence of information flowing in and out of my brain. No appointment reminders, colleague messages, work alerts, personalized advertising. Just me, my thoughts, and the void where the implant used to be. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and automatically try to access the internal clock that no longer exists. Try to check messages I'm not receiving. Try to access memories stored in cloud that are now permanently inaccessible. 11 years of photos, of videos, of personal records I thought would always be available, including almost all photos I had of my daughter. Thinking about that hurts more than the scar at the base of my skull. It's difficult in other ways too. Practical, mundane. I have no job. Who's going to hire someone without a neural implant? It's like trying to get work without knowing how to read. It's like competing in a race against people who have cars while you're on foot. I have no income. My savings were digital, accessible only through the implant. For all practical purposes, I have no money. I have no access to most services modern society considers basic. Without an implant, I can't verify my identity, can't access my medical history, can't enter buildings requiring neural authentication, can't use automated public transportation, can't buy anything that doesn't accept physical cash. For all practical purposes, I've stopped existing as a citizen. I'm a system failure, a human bug. A person who fell through the cracks of a world not designed for people like me. And it's lonely. Lonely in a way I didn't expect. That I had no way to anticipate until living it. I can't contact my daughter. Beatrice. 8 years old now. Her birthday was 3 days ago. Couldn't be there. Couldn't call. Couldn't send a message. Can't explain to her why I disappeared. Can't tell her dad didn't abandon her. That there was a reason. That maybe someday she'll understand. Any communication attempt would be traced. Any contact would put her at risk. Helix is looking for me. I know it is. And if they know I have emotional connection with someone, that person becomes leverage. Becomes a tool. I can't do that to her. So I stay silent. Stay invisible. Stay alone. And every night before sleeping in whatever abandoned corner I'm using as temporary shelter, I think about her. Imagine how the birthday was. If she asked about Dad. What Mom said. If she's already starting to forget me. But I'm alive. I'm free. And I still remember. I remember they came in peace. I remember they offered everything humanity always dreamed and asked nothing in return except the opportunity to know us. I remember they were sent away because their generosity was incompatible with our leaders' greed, because a future of abundance was less profitable than the present of scarcity. And I remember that everyone who worked with me, everyone who talked to me in the cafeteria, everyone who did the 4.72 update, doesn't remember any of this. For them, Sector 9 is just another empty corridor in a building full of corridors. For them, nothing happened. For them, the world continues making sense the same way it always did. I'm recording this because there needs to be a record. Somewhere. Somehow. Even if nobody listens. Even if it makes no difference. There needs to be proof it happened. That they came. That there was another option, another path. Another possible future that was stolen from us by half a dozen executives in a meeting room. I don't know if anyone will listen. Don't know if it makes practical difference. Helix controls the implants of millions of people, controls what they remember and what they forget. Each update can erase more. Each new version can rewrite more of history. Eventually, there won't be anyone left who remembers the visitors existed. And then it will be as if they never came. How do you preserve truth when truth can be deleted? I have no answer. I have only this. My voice, my memories, my refusal to forget, and the hope that maybe, somewhere, someone is listening. Someone who hasn't done the update yet. Someone who became suspicious, like I became suspicious. Someone who looked at the memory optimization message and wondered what exactly was being optimized. Someone who still knows the future doesn't have to be this way. If you're listening to this, I have a request. Don't do the next update, no matter what they say, no matter what features they promise, no matter how convenient it seems or how much time you'd have to postpone your responsibilities to investigate. Resist. Question. Remember. Because if everyone forgets, if everyone accepts, if everyone lets their memories be optimized and corrected and improved until nothing true remains, then they win. Then silence wins. Then nobody will ever know there was another option. And the visitors, wherever they are now, will look at us and see exactly what Helix wanted us to be from the beginning. Docile consumers, controlled memories, forgotten truth. My name is Tadeu Kessler. I worked for Helix Corporation, neural implant maintenance technician. Level 3. ID number 447B. I'm the only one who still remembers. And as long as I breathe, as long as my damaged and aching mind is still mine, as long as any part of me exists that Helix couldn't erase, I won't forget.